Hey there, welcome. This corner of the internet is for stories about the knot between love and family, the kind that tug long after the telling. If something here keeps you company on a hard night or makes you call your mother in the morning, feel free to stick around, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. Tonight's story is called I'm 52, and if my daughter needs me, I will carry her child. Fertility clinics always smell clean enough to erase memory. Bleach, lemon, a little wintergreen. There are magazines no one opens and a TV that whispers to no one. We had the three chairs by the window, the ones that made a triangle of us, and the blinds were tilted so the light came in like a question we weren't ready to answer. The doctor sat on a rolling stool and spoke in the voice people use when they're afraid the words will break. The IUI didn't take, she said, and the IVF, I'm so sorry. My daughter cried without making a sound. Tears gathered the way rain gathers on the lip of a gutter, swollen, certain, but still pretending they might recede. Her husband stared at a printed page in his hands, the way a man stares at a bill he can't pay. It wasn't even the invoice yet, just a sheet with numbers, a grid of costs that could have been lumber at a hardware store if not for the column called medication and the one called retrieval. Sometimes, the doctor continued, bodies tell us they need a different path. We can talk next steps, donor eggs, gestational carrier. She paused, compassion moving across her face like a cloud across sunlight. I know this is a lot. I am a mother, which is to say, I have learned to count different kinds of time. Gestation time, school year time, waiting room time, the time between a child's inhale and your own. In that small, ragged breath after the bad news, when the room turned into cotton and the air went flat, I did what mothers do. I took inventory of my daughter's shaking shoulders, of my son-in-law's jaw clenching, of my own hands, which had baked 100 birthday cakes and wrapped 1,000 Christmas books, and now lay useless in my lap. My body, which had carried my girl through every fever and heartbreak, sat quiet on a vinyl chair and waited to be dismissed by the cleanliness of a clinic. Maybe we should take a break, my daughter whispered, the words collapsing as they left her mouth. Her husband's eyes didn't leave the paper. We could keep going, he said. We just these costs, his voice trailed off into arithmetic. It is a particular kind of loneliness, the one where the math and the love don't match. The doctor slid a laminated sheet across the table. The corners were rounded, as if someone had decided soft edges would be kinder. If you're open, she said carefully, to talking about a gestational carrier, we have a counseling protocol, medical screening, legal arrangements. It's not a decision for today. It's a conversation for when you're ready. My daughter nodded in that way people nod when they are trying not to split in half. She reached for a pen, not to sign anything, but because sometimes your fingers need to hold onto something smooth. The pen clicked, a small, brave noise in a quiet room. On the far wall, a monitor idled black, a rectangle of night in the middle of morning. If you've ever spent time in these places, you know that even the dark screens hum. Machines that wait for tiny heartbeats grow impatient on their own. I'm 52, I heard myself say. Age is a number until the day it is the only thing anyone hears. The doctor's eyes moved to me, kind but cautious, the way you'd look at a woman who insists she can lift the piano if you'll just move the rug. I placed my hand palm down on the table. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, just a staking of ground. I wanted the cool surface to wake me, to make sure I was fully present for what I was about to say. If you need, I said, and I looked at my daughter first, if it would help, I will carry the baby for you. There it was, words in open air. A bridge thrown across a canyon. My daughter's face lifted like a flower searching for sun that had been missing all week. Surprise passed through grief and came to rest in hope's doorway. Mom, she breathed. And it was the same mom I'd heard when she was 5 and the bicycle wobbled, when she was 13 before her first concert, when she was 24 and her heart came back in pieces. There are only so many kinds of mom. They stretch across decades like the same note in different octaves. Her husband finally looked up, the paper still crooked in his hands. Something like relief flickered, then caution soldered over it. That's generous, he said slowly, as if the word might shatter if handled too fast. But isn't that, 52, he didn't finish, which is sometimes kinder than finishing. The doctor took in a measured breath. It would require careful screening, she said. High-risk obstetrics would have to sign off. There are ethical and legal considerations, but medically speaking, there are cases. She said it like a door cracked open with a chain still on. I thought of all the doors I'd opened for my daughter. The screen door to our first apartment, the heavy door of the high school auditorium, the tiny doors on an advent calendar we used the year her father lost his job and we counted days by chocolate. I thought of how, in every doorway, she always glanced back, not because she doubted what was ahead, but because she wanted to know I was there. Let's just breathe, the doctor encouraged. I can print the counseling packet. You don't need to decide today. But when a mother knows the things she can do, the body lines up before the brain has time to argue. I have carried my daughter inside me. I have carried her on my hip. I have carried her worry, her report cards, her laundry in baskets that left pink lines on my forearms. And for 2 years now, I have carried her ache without a place to set it down. Could we talk about what screening would involve? I asked, steady as a handrail. The doctor nodded, grateful for a path. She described EKGs and stress tests, the thoroughness of high-risk consults, the law's insistence on contracts that spell out the obvious and the unthinkable. She used words like informed consent and gestational carrier agreement and escrow. In another life, I might have flinched at the legalese of love. But age has taught me this. Sometimes the ink is not a cage, but a shelter. Sometimes the signature is not the end of trust, it's the beginning of peace. The printer behind her woke and shuttled paper like a small factory. My daughter took the first packet with trembling hands. The doctor uncapped a pen, then set it down between us the way a referee deposits a ball at midfield. We were not signing anything in that moment. Still, my daughter turned the pen in her fingers and pressed the tip to the line that read acknowledgement of counseling. The camera in my mind zoomed in on the nib touching paper, the ceremonial weight of ink without commitment. A tiny step. A promise only to keep talking. The machine on the wall, black glass a minute before, blinked awake for no good reason at all. A nurse had tapped it in passing, or a timer had decided it had been idle too long. The screen bloomed to life with a soft beep, one dot marching across a windowed grid. It was nothing and it was everything. A monitor without a heartbeat reminding us that, in rooms like this, silence is a temporary condition. My son-in-law cleared his throat. "We have to be realistic," he said, and the word realistic dropped between us like a coin in a church box. Clink, then buried beneath all the other clinks made by people who loved and were afraid. "I agree," I said, "so let's be realistic about what I can do." He looked at me, and for a second I saw the boy I'd met on my front steps 10 years ago, standing with a wildflower bouquet and a sweaty smile, overdressed and underconfident, asking if I thought my daughter would like the concert he had tickets for. He'd grown into a man who checked locks twice and overpaid the light bill by accident, who changed my porch light without being asked. He had a good heart, but good hearts still count dollars. Good hearts still worry that love will ask the body to do too much. "I won't pretend," I said. "I know the risks, I know how 52 sounds, but this isn't about turning back time. It's about borrowing it. It's about giving you 9 months you can't seem to buy from anyone else." I reached across the space between us and placed my palm over the packet. "If my heart is still strong, then this belly is still your home." The room held its breath. Even the printer, having emptied its belly of paper, fell quiet. Outside the blinds, a cloud passed, and the light that had been a question became, if not an answer, then at least a place to rest the question down. The doctor spoke first. "We can start with blood work," she said softly, as if not to scare the moment away. "No commitment, just information." My daughter nodded. A tear had hung on her jawline the whole time. She caught it with the back of her wrist and managed a small laugh at herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I brought mascara to a paperwork meeting." Her husband's fingers relaxed around the page until it went flat. "Information," he repeated, trying the word on. Then, almost to himself, "Okay. In families, we like to believe the grand gestures arrive with trumpets. But most of the time, they arrive as a pen sliding across a desk, as a screen that wakes with a single dot moving in steady little pulses. They arrive as a mother's hand, open and ordinary, laid on a table in a room that smells like lemon and wintergreen. We gathered our papers. The doctor promised to call with the first lab appointment. In the hallway, we passed a couple holding hands, their eyes fixed on the floor as if hope were something you might trip over. The elevator dinged. Inside its mirrored walls, I caught our reflection: three people and a stack of white pages, a triangle of tired, resolute faces. My daughter leaned her head to my shoulder the way she did when she was small and the grocery store line was too long. Some habits survive all the renovations of adulthood. When the doors opened, we stepped into afternoon. Sunlight, sidewalks, regular people with coffee, the ordinary courage of a Tuesday. I squeezed my daughter's hand once, our code for I'm here, and she squeezed back twice, I know. On the way to the car, my husband, my daughter's father, would have told a joke, something soft to let the air back in. He's gone now, years gone, but I could hear him just the same. You know, he would have said, we always wanted a bigger family. I imagined telling him what I had offered. I imagined him nodding the way he used to when I did something that scared him but made sense. Eyebrows up, a hand to my shoulder, a hush that meant I trust you. We say yes to the people we love in 1,000 small ways. Sometimes the yes is an extra blanket or a ride to the airport at 4 in the morning. Sometimes it is learning the names of new medicines or sitting beside someone who is trying not to break. And sometimes, when the math and the love won't match, when the clean smell of a clinic tries to erase the life you've lived, sometimes the yes is bigger. Sometimes the yes is this: if my heart is still strong, this belly is still your home. There's a drawer in my kitchen that holds the things we don't know where else to keep: rubber bands, spare keys, a church bulletin from last Easter. In the very back lies a small wooden box, the kind you buy at a craft store and mean to paint someday. Inside are the pieces of a childhood: my daughter's first library card, a tooth in a zip bag, a ribbon from the spelling bee where she lost on the word bouquet and laughed because flowers were never her thing. On nights when the clinic air still clung to us, she'd sit at my table with tea going cold, and I'd slide the box between us. We'd lay out the proof that she had been carried, loved, and launched. Sometimes memory is a softer medicine than anything that comes with a warning label. If you needed to chart these 3 years, you could do it in tidy blocks on a wall, 6 treatment cycles like hash marks on a prison calendar. The first IUI, full of pep talks and Pinterest optimism. The second, a little quieter. Then the switch to IVF, 2 rounds that made her brave in a way bravery never advertises. Between them, a third and fourth IUI because hope is stubborn and doctors are practical. 6 tries in all, 2 little heartbeats that flickered and then did not. We learned the cruel math of miscarriages, how the world keeps going while you stand in a bathroom holding a stick that will never go into any baby book. Bills came in white envelopes that looked a lot like the white envelopes from ordinary life: wedding invitations, coupon mailers, letters from cousins at Christmas. They stacked up like snow on a fence post. Line items I could not pronounce. Numbers that made my son-in-law stare at the ceiling at night as if the figures were written there in glow-in-the-dark ink. We paid what we could, juggled what we couldn't, and learned what every American family learns at some point: that love will sign where the bank hesitates. On the refrigerator, I kept a calendar with color-coded dots that would have looked like an art project if you didn't know what they meant. Red for injections, blue for blood draws, green for ultrasounds. On Sundays, when we'd reset the week, I'd draw a simple line across them all, a single stroke that said, "We are moving forward." Sometimes you need to see progress even when you can't feel it. Between appointments, life did its best impression of normal. We made chili in October and went to the farmer's market in June. She sent me photos, her in cap and gown again, this time for a certification at work, her on a hiking trail with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I sent back photos she already knew by heart: her at 5 with bangs I cut too short, her science fair volcano, the day her father taught her to change a tire. We reminded each other who we were beneath the paper gowns and the waiting rooms. The night after I made my offer at the clinic, we gathered at my house like we used to for birthdays. No cake, just soup and bread and the long kind of conversation that needs both. We were 3 people around a kitchen table, the same table that had once hosted math homework and prom planning, and the hard talk after her first broken heart. Only now the hard talk had medical citations. He'd done his homework. My son-in-law had printed articles about maternal age and risk curves, highlighted words like preeclampsia and gestational diabetes. He spoke in careful sentences, not because he didn't trust me, but because he did, and trust makes you slow down. There's the chance of a C-section, he said, and bed rest, and he stopped, and in the space where a statistic should have gone, I heard the rest. I don't want anything to happen to you. My daughter reached for my hand. Her thumb found the groove between my thumb and index finger, the old comfort spot from dentist visits and vaccine lines. Mom, she said, eyes wet but steady, I don't want you to be brave for me if brave means hurt. I listened the way mothers learn to listen after their children are grown, not to fix, not to argue, but to hold the weight of another person's love without dropping any. Then I did what time has taught me to do. I put our fear on one side of the scale and our promise on the other. Here's what's true, I said. I am not 25. I can't pretend this would be easy. I will do every test they ask, and if a doctor I trust says no, I will hear that no. But I also know this body. I know what it has carried and what it still can. And more than that, I know the promise we make in families. When one of us can't, another one tries. My son-in-law turned the pages in his folder the way a pastor turns a hymnal, gently, reverently. I don't want to be the reason something happens to you, he said. You won't be, I told him. If we do this, it will be because I chose it. We talked through the practicals, insurance riders, high-risk consultations, a lawyer who specializes in surrogacy agreements. We made a list with boxes to check, not because lists can solve everything, but because they can give a night its shape. When we were done, the paper had 12 little squares and a title in my daughter's handwriting, if we move forward. After they left, I stood at the counter with the wooden box open. The house was quiet in that particular way old houses are. Settling, sighing, remembering. I lifted the library card and the tooth and the ribbon, and beneath them I found a Polaroid I hadn't seen in years. Me, 20-something and tired, holding a newborn who looked vaguely offended at being removed from her warm apartment. In the photo, my hair was a mess and my eyes were bright. I looked like a woman who would carry anything that needed carrying. I put the photo on the fridge, next to the calendar with its dots. Beside it, I taped one of the hospital invoices, not as a threat, but as a reminder. We were paying a cost either way. Money, fear, time, the ache of watching your child want something good and be told no by biology. The question wasn't whether there would be a price, it was which price we were willing to pay together. The next morning, my daughter texted me a picture of her at age 8, missing both front teeth, holding a sign that said 100th day of school in glitter glue. Found this in a box, she wrote. You always made the hard days feel like they were going somewhere. That was the heart of it, I realized, not heroics, not a grand gesture for the internet to applaud. Just a mother's job, the ordinary miracle of lending your strength until someone else remembers their own. I sent back the photo from the Polaroid. We've done this before, I typed. Different decade. Same love. The phone buzzed again. I'm scared, she wrote. I know, I answered. Me too. There aren't many sentences that tell the truth as cleanly as those two. They sat on the screen between us like two hands reaching, finding each other in the dark. At our next appointment, the counselor asked us to state our intentions out loud, so there would be no confusion later when hormones and headlines and opinions got loud. My daughter spoke first, voice trembling but sure. My son-in-law went second, steadying as he went. Then it was my turn. I said the simplest thing I knew, the shape of my promise in one breath. Carrying a child for 9 months, I told them, has never been a burden to me. Law offices have their own kind of quiet. Not the sterile hush of a clinic, but the carpeted pause of a place where words are meant to outlive the people who say them. The receptionist offered lemon water and the sort of smile that suggests she has seen every version of a hard day and knows to keep both kindness and distance. We took our usual triangle, my daughter, her husband, and me around a table that could have hosted a family dinner if not for the neat stacks of documents at its center. A pen lay on top, weighty and black, the kind of pen that wants to be taken seriously. Before anything else, Attorney Ramos said, you should each have your own counsel. She was speaking to me. You are the one carrying. You deserve an advocate who answers only to you. We can proceed with today's overview, but I'll insist you review the final draft with an independent attorney. That's not suspicion, that's respect. Respect is a word that grows larger as you age. I nodded. I want that. She turned to all three of us. This isn't a wedding license or a pinky promise, she said gently. It's a map for every good weather road and every storm road. Surrogacy is love, yes, but it's also medicine and money and state law. Our job is to keep the love from getting lost in those other things. She began with the simplest anchor, autonomy. The person who is pregnant is the patient, she said, looking at me, then at my daughter and her husband. In every hospital, in every exam room, the physicians owe their duty of care to her. No contract can turn a doctor's order into a command over her body, and no clause can force her to undergo a procedure she does not consent to. We write that plainly so later no one mistakes hope for authority. She slid a page forward, a heading centered in bold, Protection of Bodily Autonomy. I read aloud because sometimes you need to hear the words in your own voice to trust them. The gestational carrier retains absolute right to informed consent and refusal for any and all medical interventions, including but not limited to induction, cesarean delivery, amniocentesis, and selective reduction. She nodded. You will initial each page, not because paper needs your handwriting, but because future you might need present you certainty. We talked insurance next, the way families talk about umbrellas before a picnic. My health plan would need a pregnancy rider. They would purchase supplemental life and short-term disability policies for me, not as a dare to fate, but as an apology to it if it surprised us. A separate rider contemplated NICU costs if the babies came early. Numbers lined up like soldiers, premiums, deductibles, out-of-pocket maximums. We placed them in a folder labeled If It Rains because sometimes names make courage easier. Then, escrow. Money lives in a neutral account, Ramos said. Up front, fully funded. That way no monthly hardship becomes a lever pressed against a medical choice. We build a wall between your wallet and your consent. My son-in-law exhaled, a sound between relief and responsibility. We can do that, he said, the way a man says we'll figure out how to do that. My daughter, careful as always, asked the question I knew was sitting heavy in her chest. What about information? I don't want to be cut out of my own children's milestones, but I also don't want mom to feel like she's being watched. Good, Ramos said, pleased by the balance in the question. We tailor a HIPAA release that's narrow. You receive essential clinical updates, viability, major labs, ultrasound summaries, by design, not by surveillance. No one gets to call the nurse's station demanding to overhear intimate decisions. You'll learn what you need to love your children as their parents, and she'll keep what she needs to remain a person, not a project. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, a phone rang. In our room, paper turned. Now, she said, the clause that causes the most soul-searching. She didn't have to name it, we knew. She placed a hand on the stack but didn't lift it. You have considered the possibility of twins. You have heard what medicine says about risk at 52. Let me be explicit. There is no such thing as a contract that can compel a selective reduction. Physicians do not enforce private agreements. They practice medicine. Courts do not order surgeries, especially not on pregnant bodies. If a doctor recommends an intervention for safety, that recommendation is medical advice, not a legal instruction. The decision will live here. She tapped the table, then touched her own sternum. In the body and conscience of the person carrying. My son-in-law's jaw tensed, the old flinch of a man who wants to protect everyone in the room and knows he cannot. And if the doctor believes the procedure is necessary, then we will listen, I said before the attorney could answer, because this was one sentence I needed to own. We will listen the way you listen to sirens in the distance, with respect and urgency. But listen is not the same as obey. I will not sign away my right to say yes or no to a knife, not because I am stubborn, but because I am responsible for me, for them. Ramo's eyes softened. That's the posture the law expects and the posture medicine respects. We built our scaffolding the way careful families do, one measured plank at a time. A birth plan that recognized reality's habit of improvising. A hierarchy for emergencies. If I was under anesthesia, my designated proxy, my sister, not my daughter, so parenting decisions would not collide with patient decisions, would consent for me. A commitment that we would seek second opinions when time allowed, and hold to the first opinion when the clock did not. If a cesarean became prudent, we would ask our questions and give our trust honestly. If bed rest came, they would pay for meals and a cleaning service, not as charity, but as recognition that pregnancy is labor long before the delivery room. We even agreed on little kindnesses that contracts rarely consider. No surprise visitors at appointments, no cameras in vulnerable moments unless everyone said yes. No posting on social media about my body without my consent. Love thrives where dignity is tended. Ramos turned the stack so the signatures faced us. These aren't vows, she said. They're instructions for loving each other when adrenaline is high and sleep is low. She pointed to the first line, intended mother. My daughter picked up the pen. Her hand shook just enough to prove she cared. She wrote her name as if she were signing not a document, but a promise to the child she hadn't met. Intended father. My son-in-law followed. He paused, glanced at me, and in his eyes I recognized the boy who stood on my porch with a bouquet the first time he asked my daughter out. Take care of her, I had said then. He was saying it back to me now without words. He signed. Then the line for gestational carrier, such a clinical phrase for something so ancient. I placed my finger on the page first, tracing the curve where my name would live. It felt like touching the rim of a cradle you're about to sand and paint. I signed. The black ink sat on the page like a small, quiet courage. We initialed each page, the way you initial photographs in an album to remind yourself where you were when. Close-up moments, the swoop of my daughter's J, the deliberate print of his last name, the tidy M in mine. Ramos slid a yellow tab onto the page with the clause we had read aloud earlier, and we each initialed again. Protection of bodily autonomy. The caption under our signatures, bolded and centered, seemed almost like the title of a chapter we'd been writing since the day my girl was born. Last piece, Ramos said, reaching for a separate document. This is the pre-birth parentage petition. If allowed in your state, a judge can establish legal parentage before delivery, so the birth certificate lists you two immediately. That keeps the hospital from putting your mother's name in a place it doesn't belong and spares everyone a paperwork scramble when the only thing that should be happening is skin to skin and ugly crying. We laugh the way you laugh at a funeral when someone tells a true thing kindly. Then we sign that too, my signature absent by design. Parents are recognized because they will be parents. Carriers are protected because they are carrying. Each role honored, each role bounded. When it was done, Ramos gathered the documents and pressed them into two folders, one for them, one for me. Her nails were short and unpainted. I trusted her more for that, though I couldn't have explained why. You'll each take these to your own counsel, she said, and you will each sleep on them if you wake up at 3 in the morning with a question, and you will write it down. Nothing about this is fast, that's by design. We stood. The notary came in with a seal that left a raised circle on the corner of our pages, a small moon embossing our plan. I ran my thumb over the texture, the way you might proof the stitching on a baby blanket. At the elevator, we did what families do after the serious work is finished. We argued sweetly about lunch. Soup again? Tacos? My daughter wanted something messy and celebratory. My son-in-law wanted something he could pay for without checking the bank app first. We compromised on deli sandwiches, which is to say, we did what we had just promised to do in larger ways. We found a middle that honored all three of us. On the ride down, my daughter leaned against me, shoulder to shoulder, and read the bold heading peeking from my folder. Her lips moved as she traced the words silently. Say it out loud, I told her. She met my eyes. The fluorescent light was unflattering and honest. We were both older in it and somehow more ourselves. She read, Protection of bodily autonomy. The doors opened. Somewhere a baby cried and somewhere else a printer fired up and somewhere else a nurse laughed at a joke that did not belong to us. We stepped into the corridor like people who had decided to walk together even when the hallway turns. I tucked the folder under my arm and felt the weight of it, not heavy exactly, but present. A thing you choose to carry. Because for all the clauses and riders and embossed seals, the truth was simple enough to fit on the back of a grocery receipt. In this family, love has edges so it won't spill. And at the center of those edges, written in ink no storm could smudge, was the rule that let the rest of the promises breathe. Bodily autonomy is the clause that cannot be erased. The first ultrasound is a kind of chapel. Lights dim, voices lower, a wand anoints the air with gel, and everyone leans toward a screen as if it might show the face of God. The sonographer moved with the competence of someone who has taught joy and disappointment to share a room. She found the angle pressed, and there it was, an oval of light in a field of gray. Then another. She didn't speak first. She let the image preach. Two small apartments, side by side, duplex of maybes. My daughter's hand found mine. The squeeze was the same one she used at the top of a roller coaster when she was 11, brave and terrified, refusing to close her eyes for the drop. Her husband gripped the railing at the foot of the bed as if the whole building might need bracing. The sonographer clicked a few keys, measured millimeters that felt like miles, and finally said it. Two gestational sacs, she whispered, a smile she couldn't help. Congratulations. Hope and fear are twins, too. They arrive together, argue over who gets the bigger bedroom, and slam doors when the other makes noise after lights out. The room filled with both at once. The obstetrician joined us, a woman with kind eyes and the tired posture of someone who has held 1,000 stories in the same day. She didn't waste our time. 2 is wonderful, she said, and 2 at 52 is ambitious. She listed risks without dramatics, higher chances of preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, preterm labor, bed rest. Words we had read, but hearing them now felt like hearing a weather report for a storm that already rattled the windows. We'll refer you to maternal fetal medicine, she said. They'll watch closely. We adjust as we go, one appointment at a time. On the screen, a flicker, then another. Not music yet, but rhythm. The sonographer turned up the volume just enough to make a suggestion of a sound. 2 tiny metronomes practicing in the dark. The doctor paused, and I knew the next part before she spoke. We talk about everything, she said gently, including options we hope we never need. In rare circumstances, we discuss selective reduction to protect the health of the carrier or the viability of a twin. She held my gaze. We're nowhere near decisions like that. I just don't want you ambushed by vocabulary later. We understand, I said, though understanding is different from accepting. My son-in-law cleared his throat. If that conversation ever came, he began, voice thin with the effort of standing on 2 boats at once. How does it work? Legally, I mean. The doctor glanced at the screen, then at the 3 of us. Legally, medically, ethically, the pregnant patient has the right to consent or refuse any procedure. Doctors offer recommendations, families talk, but no one signs a contract that commands a body. She said it kindly, like someone laying a hand on your shoulder after a hard truth. We nodded. The appointment wrapped with a printout of the image, 2 small moons on a black sky, and a follow-up card for the specialist. In the hallway, my daughter laughed and cried at the same time, the way new parents do when love outruns language. My son-in-law held the door, the picture tucked protectively in his jacket like a passport. For a few hours, we let ourselves have just joy. We bought deli sandwiches and ate them in the car because the seats felt like a safer place to be happy than a dining room where the words preeclampsia and NICU might sneak under the door. We sent the picture to no one and everyone, to God, to the future, to the part of ourselves that had forgotten what wonder felt like. That night, an email arrived. The subject line was tidy, proposed addendum, medical necessity clause. He had addressed it to the attorney, copied my daughter and me, and used the tone of a man trying to speak through a pane of glass. Given today's ultrasound and the risks discussed, he wrote, I would feel safer if our agreement included language that, in the event a physician recommends selective reduction for maternal safety or fetal viability, the gestational carrier agrees to follow medical advice. It was not cruel. It was not a demand. It was fear doing math and asking paper to carry it. I read it at the kitchen counter, the wooden box of childhood open beside me like a witness. I pictured his hands hovering over the keyboard, the way he always hovered before doing something that felt like it might break more than it fixed. I pictured my daughter reading it on the couch, eyes skimming the words twice before they landed, one hand absently on her stomach as if to apologize for making it part of the conversation. I typed and deleted, typed and deleted. Then I called a meeting the next day. No lawyers, no doctors. Just the three of us and the table that had survived every era of our family. He arrived with an apology ready. I shouldn't have sent it like that, he said before the coffee was poured. I should have asked. I should have waited. Last night I lay there and I imagined an emergency and a doctor saying we're out of time and me watching, losing you, he said, looking at me, or losing all three. I thought if it was on paper, if it was decided, we'd be safer. My daughter put a hand on his forearm. Her thumb made a slow circle, the way you calm a spooked horse. We're all scared, she said. I know, he whispered. I just don't know where to put it. Not in my signature, I said, soft but immovable. Not there. He nodded, not agreement yet, but recognition. I slid the printed addendum back across the table. Medical advice is a lighthouse, I said. You don't ignore it, but the lighthouse doesn't steer the boat. The person at the wheel does. I will listen to every recommendation with all the seriousness it deserves, especially if the word necessary is used. But you cannot write a sentence that turns my body into a lever someone else can pull when they are afraid. Silence rearranged the room. My daughter looked between us as if translating languages no one had taught her. What if a doctor says it's the only way to protect you? He asked, voice cracking on the last word. Then I will weigh it, I said. With you, with her, with the full weight of what it means. But I won't agree now, in a quiet kitchen, to a decision future me hasn't met yet. That isn't preparation, that's surrender. He looked down at his hands, wedding ring shining a little in the morning light. I don't want to make you the villain, he said. I don't want to put you in a position where you have to say no and feel like you're choosing. Choosing is what adults do, I said gently. And if a form ever lands in this family that asks a pen to silence a heartbeat, don't ask me to hold that pen to spare you the weight of it. He flinched, not from accusation, but from the truth of the thing. We are all tempted to outsource our hardest choices to whoever loves us enough to carry the blame. My daughter finally spoke, her voice the steady one now. We made a rule, she said, tapping the folder from the lawyer. Autonomy is the clause that can't be erased. We wrote that because we love each other, not because we don't. If something terrible comes, we meet it together. But we don't pre-authorize my mother's body to do what our fear wants just to help us sleep in October. He nodded again, slower this time, the kind of nod that means the head is pulling the heart along like a stubborn suitcase. I'm sorry, he said to me. I was trying to protect you and ended up asking you to carry the one thing I should carry myself. I reached across and covered his hand. It was warm and shaking just enough to tell me he was telling the truth. Fear belongs to the person who feels it, I said. You can hand me your coat, your keys, your errands, but don't hand me the part of this that would haunt you. If something must be signed that says one stays and one goes, then let your name be the one on that line, not mine. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet and clear at the same time, like windows after a storm. Okay, he said. No addendum. We didn't hug right away. Some agreements need a minute to settle in the bones. We sat and ate the breakfast we had forgotten to eat. Eggs gone cold and coffee gone lukewarm, and it tasted like peace anyway. Later, at the specialist's office, the monitor found them again, two small tenants tapping on the other side of the glass. The room felt steadier, not because the risks had shrunk, but because the edges of our love had been marked with tape and ink. The sonographer caught my daughter's hand in midair and guided it to the screen, pressing her fingertip over one flicker, then the other. There, she said, and there. In the reflection, I saw our faces. My daughter with the fierce attention of a woman learning new names for hope. My son-in-law with the sober tenderness of a man who has decided to be brave without outsourcing it. And me, 52, taking inventory the way mothers do. Counting heartbeats, counting hands, counting the promises we had made and the ones we had refused to make. Outside, the day went on like days do. Somewhere, a band practiced in a high school gym. Somewhere, a grocery cart squeaked on a tile. Somewhere, a mail carrier slid an envelope into a slot. Ordinary life kept its appointment with itself. Inside, in the dim light of the ultrasound room, two rhythms kept time with us. And beneath all the numbers and clauses and white-coded words, we held to the sentence that would guide us more than any statute ever could. If a sacrifice must be signed, let the ink live where the fear lives. Don't put it in the hand that is already doing the carrying. The morning after the twins announced themselves in grainy constellations, I brought a plate of muffins to the law office like a woman bringing flowers to a cemetery, knowing the gesture wouldn't change anything and doing it anyway. Paper has a way of quieting rooms, and I wanted the room to know we were more than ink. Attorney Ramos read the email first. She didn't flinch or sigh. She let the words do their own work. On her screen, the subject line sat heavy, bolded like a bruise. Selective reduction request, proposed addendum for medical necessity. She scrolled, the glow of the monitor whitening her face. When she finished, she turned the laptop toward me so I could see it again, as if seeing it in daylight might make it a different letter. It didn't. He sent this at 12:41 a.m., she said, clinical as a lab result. That's when fear likes to play lawyer. It came from love, I said, because it had. The scared kind. And because it came from love, she replied, our job is to keep it from becoming pressure. She pushed aside the muffins, made a neat space in the middle of the table, and brought out our agreement. Lawyers touch documents the way mothers touch a sleeping child, checking for breath, smoothing the corners. We're going to read this again, she said, like we are trying to hear where it breathes. We began at the place she called the spine, protection of bodily autonomy. She read that paragraph out loud, the way a congregation reads the creed not for God's memory, but for their own. The gestational carrier retains absolute right to informed consent and refusal for any and all medical interventions, including but not limited to induction, cesarean delivery, amniocentesis, and selective reduction. Selective reduction is not an instruction embedded in any contract, she added, looking up. It is a medical option some doctors discuss in specific circumstances. That's medicine's lane. Contracts don't practice medicine. They keep people from using medicine to practice control. She flipped forward. We already walled money off with escrow. That matters. It means no invoice can lean on a conscience. But last night's email tells me we need a stronger fence around two things. Your right to say no to invasive procedures and the children's right not to be turned into bargaining chips. The email wasn't meant as leverage, I said, and the defense sounded small even to me. I know, she said gently, but fear tries to borrow tomorrow's pen. We're going to lock the drawer it lives in. Her keyboard clicked with a rhythm I had already learned to trust. She titled the new document Addendum A, Non-Coercion and Life Protective Measures, and read as she wrote, like a teacher composing a letter to a future storm. No coercion/no retaliation. No party shall attempt to pressure, compel, induce, or penalize the gestational carrier to consent to any invasive medical procedure, including selective reduction. Any attempt, written, verbal, financial, or social, shall be a material breach. Independent medical judgment. Recommendations by providers are exactly that, recommendations. Consent belongs to the patient. No language herein converts advice into command. Cooling off and second opinion when time allows. If a non-emergent invasive procedure is proposed, the parties shall observe a 24-hour cooling off period and, where medically feasible, obtain a second opinion. In emergent circumstances where time does not allow, the gestational carrier's designated health proxy shall act consistent with her known values. Escrow independence. No payment, reimbursement, or benefit shall be conditioned upon agreement to any medical procedure. Funding obligations continue irrespective of consent decisions. Clinician shield. No party shall contact clinical staff to urge, lobby, or insinuate consequences regarding a proposed procedure. All questions shall route through the patient and her provider or through counsel. No adverse publicity. No party shall publish or threaten to publish commentary about the gestational carrier's medical decisions. Privacy is not a courtesy, it is a condition. Liquidated damages and injunctive relief. Because harm from coercion is difficult to quantify, the parties agree that a breach triggers liquidated damages and entitles the gestational carrier to immediate injunctive relief without posting bond. She paused. Plain English version. No one tries to scare you into a surgery, and if they do, a judge can tell them to stop before breakfast. I smiled at the muffins. We have breakfast, I said. I'd rather skip court. Me too, she answered. That's why we write, so we never have to ask a stranger in a robe to teach us our own promises. We kept going. She added an emergency ethics consult clause, a standing agreement that if time permitted and the room grew hot with fear, the hospital's ethics team could join us to translate medicine into something we could carry without breaking. She named me in a dignity and boundaries clause. No exam room recordings, no surprise observers, no hands where a yes hadn't been given. And one more, she said, tapping the original contract. We said who decides if you are asleep, the proxy. Now we'll say this. If an emergent decision risks the loss of both children and you, and clinicians identify an intervention that could reasonably protect your life with uncertain fetal outcome, your proxy shall follow the value you stated here. Preserve maternal life while avoiding fetal harm where possible, unless your own voice at bedside says otherwise. This makes me sound braver than I feel, I told her. This makes you sound like who you were yesterday, she said, without looking up. Paper doesn't create character, it remembers it. We printed the draft, the paper was warm. She placed it in front of me, then picked up the midnight email and set it beside the addendum like a before and after. The subject line stared at us again, dark letters on white. Selective reduction request. Ramos reached for a red pen, not to grade, but to frame. She drew a box around the subject and wrote in the margin, "Fear speaking without counsel." On the addendum, she underlined non-coercion and wrote, "Love speaking with one." This, she said, tapping the email, will go into our file, not as evidence of bad faith, but as context. It proves your family is doing what families do, learning out loud. And this, she tapped the addendum, goes on top. It turns last night's panic into tonight's protection. We invited my daughter and her husband after lunch. He looked as if he had slept 3 hours and spent 2 of them apologizing to no one in particular. He sat down with his hands open, palms up, the posture of a man arriving without weapons. "I read your email," Ramos said, unthreatening as a nurse. "I'm glad you sent it here. This is where fear belongs, in daylight, on paper, with people who can talk to it." He swallowed. "I shouldn't have. You should have asked for help." She finished softly. "Which is what you did, even if you didn't know it." She slid the addendum across the table. He reads slowly, like a person sounding out a new language. When he reached no coercion/no retaliation, he nodded. When he reached clinician shield, he exhaled. When he reached liquidated damages, he winced and then nodded again. "I don't want money to be a weapon," he said, "not even accidentally." "That's what this forbids," she said. "Not your worry, your leverage." He put a finger on the sentence about second opinions. "I like this," he said. "It gives me something to do besides panic." My daughter read with her lips moving, as if repeating the words could stitch them into muscle. At dignity and boundaries, she squeezed my knee under the table. At preserve maternal life, she reached for my hand and didn't ask if it was okay to hold it. Some permissions are permanent. "Questions?" Ramos asked. He shook his head. "Just a request," he said, turning to me. "If the worst day comes and I start talking too fast, will you remind me I promised this?" "I will," I said. "And if I start making jokes to keep from crying, you remind me I promised to let you see me as I am." We signed, not because signatures summon safety, but because they build a path we can find in the dark. The notary came with her little manual press, metal kissed paper, leaving a raised seal that you can feel with your eyes closed. The circle caught the light like a coin rescued from a fountain, made for wishes, reclaimed for work. Ramos stapled the addendum to the original agreement and stamped the corner. The stamp left purple ink on the page and a small satisfaction in my chest. There is an ancient comfort in seals. They tell wolves and winds alike that somebody cares enough to mark this house as kept. When the last page cooled, Ramos looked at all three of us the way a teacher looks at a class that has finally understood long division. There, she said. The contract now says what you meant before the night grew loud. My son-in-law lifted the midnight email again, read the subject as if to make amends, and slid it into the folder behind addendum A. Can we keep this? He asked, as a reminder of the version of me that writes at 12:41 a.m. without asking for help. You should, Ramos said. Shame is a poor editor, but humility is a very good one. We stood. The muffins had gone untouched. He took one for the road, as if to prove that life still included small sweet things. My daughter tucked the folder to her chest like a library book she intended to finish. I traced the raised ring of the notary seal once more, the way a grandmother might trace the soft skull swirl on a sleeping baby. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed their indifferent hymn. We waited for the elevator like people who knew how to share a silence without letting it turn into distance. When the doors opened, a clerk walked past balancing a stack of file boxes up to his chin. The labels faced out: adoption, trusts, estate name change. Paper everywhere, holding together the rickety bridge between what we hope and what we can prove. Outside, the day had the clear look of weather that had decided not to be dramatic. We crossed the street without hurrying. Cars stopped. A cyclist waved us on. In the small choreography of a crosswalk, strangers honored one another's bodies with breaks and patience. It occurred to me that this was all we had asked of the contract, to make our family behave like a good city for one another. At the curb, my daughter kissed my cheek. Thank you, she said, not for carrying, not for courage, but for the particular mercy of sitting at a table long enough to turn fear into sentences. My son-in-law cleared his throat. Ramos, he said, what's the point of all this if you had to say it in a sentence? She smiled the smile of someone who collects sentences the way some people collect coins. That's easy, she said. A contract is something you crawl under together when the weather turns. It's a roof, not a leash. I took their hands in mine, one on each side, an old habit on a new street, and with the weight of the folder under my arm and the lightness that comes when words have found the right order, I named the truth we had just written into being. A contract is to protect, not to command. News in families travels faster than light and slower than sense. By Thursday, someone on his side, an aunt who collects prayer requests the way other women collect spoons, had posted a careful little paragraph on Facebook. Please keep our family in your thoughts. A delicate situation. Twins, complications, a decision that may need to be made. We want what's best for the babies. She didn't say my name, she didn't have to. In a town where everyone has sat in the same bleachers and bought the same raffle tickets, people can do the math without showing their work. Within hours, there were comments like dandelions after a wind, sudden, widespread, impossible to replant. Some were kind in the way casseroles are kind. What courage, what love. Others cut with the politeness of a sharpened butter knife. At her age, isn't that selfish? One woman, a stranger with a profile photo of a puppy in a patriotic bandana, wrote, if you really loved those babies, you wouldn't risk them for a fairy tale headline. Someone else fired back. If you really loved those parents, you'd let them make their own medical choices. The thread turned into a firefly jar of opinions, bright, trapped, bumping glass. My daughter screenshotted and sent me only the gentle ones. She underlined brave and gift and sent 3 blue hearts like bandages. But the algorithm is a poor steward of mercy. The sharp-edged comments found me anyway, surfacing in the quiet of my kitchen with their sideways smirk. I set my phone face down and folded dish towels as if they were petitions that could be granted by neat corners. That night, his mother called him and did what mothers do when they are scared for their children. She tried to pull every lever in the room. She used the word dangerous 3 times and the word irresponsible once, as if it were a hot potato she didn't really want to hold. She reminded him of the cousin whose twins came 10 weeks early and lived under light and plastic for months. She cried. He swallowed hard and made the sound a man makes when his heart is in a tug-of-war between 2 women who have both fed him. The next morning he arrived at my door early, with coffee and an apology already forming. He put the cups on the counter and didn't sit. I need to ask something, he said, and because he is not a man who likes to ask anything of anyone, My chest tightened before the words even arrived. What? I asked, bracing for the kind of question that breaks furniture on its way in. Maybe we should pause the next escrow deposit, he said carefully, like a person walking across a floor he isn't sure will hold. Just until we clarify the plan with the specialists. My mom, my family, they're saying we're funding a risk we don't have to take. It landed between us with the metallic ring of a drop tool. We both looked at it. 2 days earlier, we had signed the addendum that said money could not be a leash. He knew it, I knew it. The paper knew it best of all. I did not raise my voice. Age has taught me that volume is a poor substitute for truth. You're asking me to carry the twins, I said, and also to carry the weight of your family's fear by letting it sit in the bank account with the groceries. He closed his eyes, his palm flattening against the counter like he needed the cool of the stone. I know what the contract says, he whispered. I'm not trying to threaten you. If they're right, if we are, if something happens because I didn't. I heard the tremble and remembered the boy with a bouquet on my porch, 10 summers ago, asking if she liked the band he had tickets for. He has always wanted to get it right. It is a beautiful instinct and a terrible weight. I called Ramos. There are some moments when even the oldest wisdom in a mother's body needs a translator in a dark suit. He listened while I put her on speaker. I got ahead of myself, he said to her, honest and plain. I suggested pausing escrow. Ramos didn't scold, she opened a window. Thank you for telling the truth, she said. Let's name this clearly. Using escrow to influence a medical decision is coercion. That's not my opinion, that's the document you signed with your name. If you're scared, say scared, but don't ask a bank ledger to say it for you. He nodded, chastened not by anger but by clarity. I'm scared, he said. My family is in my ear. The internet is in my pocket, and I want to keep everyone I love alive, and every door that looks like control looks like safety to me. Then let's build you a different door, she said. Here's what I recommend, a hospital ethics consult, not because you have done something wrong, but because we want to preempt wrong. They are very good at turning shouting into sentences people can share. By afternoon, maternal fetal medicine had us on the schedule for a consult the following week. My blood pressure, already fond of turning small storms into headlines, took the opportunity to climb. At home, I felt the familiar squeeze, the slight fuzz at the edges of my vision that says, sit down, soften your knees, drink water. I did all three. It didn't listen. By evening, my daughter insisted on the hospital. We went, quiet as a secret, carrying our overnight bag like humility. In triage, they placed a cuff around my arm and the machine hummed its impartial hum. The numbers were high enough to ask for company. They admitted me for observation, a phrase that sounds like patience and feels like a spotlight. In the dim of the room, a nurse with common sense eyes fussed with wires and asked the kind of questions that let a person breathe while telling the truth. Any headaches? Any swelling? Any stress? She delivered the last word with a humor that made my daughter laugh and then cry in the same breath. We have some of that, she admitted, and the nurse nodded like a woman who had figured out mercury long ago. They put the monitor belt across my stomach and found them. Tap, tap and tap, tap, small percussionists practicing scales. In the glow of the screen, my daughter curled herself around me in the awkward geometry of hospital furniture, an arm across my ribs, her cheek on my shoulder. When you're grown, you learn there are only a few places in the world where you can rest that way without permission. The person who raised you, the person you married, and, if you're lucky, the child you're preparing to meet. My phone vibrated on the tray, face down. It could buzz itself to pieces for all I cared. The internet could write a chorus. The twins had written a rhythm. I listened to it like a church listens to the organ warming up. The hospital's patient advocate stopped by, a woman close to my age with a lanyard full of keys and the kind of posture that tells you she has learned to walk through other people's storms without catching a cold. We got the ethics consult scheduled, she said, flipping her badge so it sat straight. We like to keep families in the same room with the same facts. Misinformation is a wildfire, meetings are a fire break. She glanced at my daughter, then at me. Also, we can put a note on your chart about visitors and phone calls. If you want the circle small, we help you draw it. Small, I said. Circle, small. She smiled and wrote it down like a prescription. Visitation. Immediate family only. No updates by phone without patient consent. Refer all inquiries to the designated spokesperson. She handed my daughter a stack of blank badges. Be the gate, she told her, not the door. That night, the monitor beeped softly in the kind of pattern that teaches a person to believe in math again. Tap, 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 tap. My daughter's breath matched it without trying. Outside the door, wheels turned and voices murmured. Inside, a quiet that knew the difference between being alone and being sheltered. In the morning, his mother texted an apology. I got carried away. I was scared. I said things I shouldn't have said to him. I'm sorry if it made this harder. Fear is a poor editor, but it can be taught. I sent back a sentence that tasted like civility. Thank you for saying that. We're listening to doctors we trust. We're also listening to the woman carrying them. Both are required. At 10, the ethics team knocked. 3 people, a physician with the shoulders of an oak tree, a social worker who looked like she could fold a fitted sheet without swearing, and a chaplain with eyes like your favorite teacher. They sat, asked for our version first, then laid out theirs. Here's the shared map, the physician said, drawing with his finger on the air between us. 2 babies, 1 mother, gestational, yes, but mother in the biological sense, the patient we owe our duty to. Elevated blood pressure tonight, better this morning. No current indication for invasive intervention. Risk remains, as it does for all twin pregnancies. More so at your age, we watch closely. We let data steer, not comments. And the ethics part, the chaplain added, is simple and hard at once. Decisions belong as close to the body as possible. Contracts are roofs, not ropes. Families can disagree, but they cannot deputize clinicians to enforce private fears. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at my son-in-law, and the boy in that man nodded like a student who has found the right page. The social worker turned to my daughter. We can assign a single point of contact for updates to extended family. That person says exactly this. She is stable. The babies are stable. The care team is following standard protocols. We appreciate your love. We are not crowdsourcing medical decisions. She handed my daughter a card with the sentence printed on it. Use it word for word when your phone lights up. We left the meeting lighter, not because anything had been solved forever, but because someone had swept the floor and put the chairs back where they belonged. I slept that afternoon the way a person sleeps when she has stood at the center of a circle and realized she is not responsible for holding the entire circumference. When they finally discharged me with a sheet of ordered calm, rest, fluids, follow up Tuesday, the nurse winked and pointed at the sign she'd taped inside my chart. No social updates. Patient story equals patient's voice. I wanted to hug her for the math of that. 1 life, 1 voice, not 1,000 hands on the keyboard. At home, my daughter made soup we didn't taste and fluffed pillows that didn't need it. A friend dropped off flowers and, as a great mercy, did not stay. The evening light found our living room and sat with us for a while, uninvited and welcome, the way grace sometimes does. My phone buzzed again on the table. A cousin had posted a new prayer. A neighbor had posted a rebuttal. The thread counted itself upward. 63 comments, 78. 104. The internet had chosen its canyon and was yelling its echo across it. I pressed my palm over the place where life makes its small thunder. Beneath my hand, steady and undecorated, hope kept time. The internet can pick sides, I said to the quiet room, to my daughter, to the twin rhythms that did not care who was trending. This body chooses life. Hospitals have rooms that aren't meant for healing so much as for understanding. No beeping, no rails, just a long table, a pitcher of water, and walls the color of decisions. They put us in one of those maternal fetal medicines conference room, with a screen at the far end and chairs arranged so no one had to sit at the head. The specialist came in first, a woman who carried her authority lightly, like a book she'd read twice and still respected. I'm Dr. Surrey, she said, shaking our hands as if each of us were the patient. An ethicist followed Dr. Round glasses, teacher's posture, and the social worker from yesterday, Leela, who looked like she could fold a crisis the way some people fold fitted sheets. We're here to make a shared map, Dr. Surrey began, drawing an invisible rectangle in the air. 2 fetuses, 1 pregnancy, a gestational carrier who is 52 and otherwise healthy. She smiled at me as if to say I see the person before the risk. With twins at your age, the chances of blood pressure issues, gestational diabetes, and preterm delivery are higher. That isn't drama, it's math. Our plan is surveillance and prevention. Low dose aspirin if you tolerate it, frequent blood pressure checks at home and here, glucose screening, growth scans every few weeks, and quick escalation if the numbers talk to us. She turned the screen on. 4 words appeared in a quiet sans serif: autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, justice. I promise I won't give a lecture, Dr. Ko said, smiling. But these are the guardrails. Autonomy, the person who is pregnant decides. Beneficence, we act for her good. Non-maleficence, we avoid harm. Justice, we don't let power or money bend the care. He glanced at our file. Your contract and the addendum? He tapped the page where protection of bodily autonomy lived. Already speak this language. That makes our work easier. Leela slid a paper toward us titled Values Note for Clinical Chart. This is optional, she said, but helpful. We ask patients to write, in their own words, what matters to them before a noisy day arrives. Clinicians can see it at a glance. I read the prompts. In a crisis, I hope my team remembers. If time is short, I want decisions to lean toward. Please avoid. Write it like you're leaving a note on the counter for your future self, Leela said. Simple and kind. We took pens. My daughter went first, the way she always goes first when someone needs a brave model. Remember, there are 3 lives I love in the room, but 1 body doing the carrying. Let care honor that. My son-in-law wrote slowly, careful as a man setting a tray of glasses on a shelf. If time is short, protect her life and try to protect both babies. Don't trade her consent for my panic. I wrote what my bones already knew. I will listen to medical advice. I will not sign my body over to fear. Please talk to me like a person you expect to understand. Dr. Suri nodded as we slid the page back. We'll scan this into your chart. It will sit right next to the vitals and labs, heart rate, blood pressure, and this, your voice. She clicked to a new slide, no pictures, just a list called Triggers for Action. Sustained severe range blood pressure, right arrow admit and treat. Concerning labs or symptoms, right arrow same-day evaluation. Signs of preterm labor, right arrow steroids, monitoring, NICU consult. If an invasive procedure is proposed, right arrow second opinion when time allows. Your consent governs. I want you to hear how boring this is, she said, kind and direct. Boring is good in medicine. It means no surprises, just thresholds and responses. My son-in-law raised a hand he didn't need to raise. If, God forbid, a doctor says, we have to act now or we could lose all 3, I don't want to be the guy who argues case law in a hallway. You won't be, Dr. Ko said. In true emergencies, medicine gets loud and clear. The decision still belongs to the patient or her proxy if she's under anesthesia, but the path is narrow and we walk it fast. Your addendum's cooling off and second opinion clause applies when time allows. When it doesn't, we follow the values note and standard of care. No one is asking you to carry an impossible guilt. We are asking you to carry courage. He looked at me. And you are the patient we owe that courage to. The money found its way into the room. Money always does. Can we talk about NICU costs? My son-in-law asked, the words humble, not grasping. My head keeps doing numbers at night. Leela opened a folder labeled If It Rains. That's why escrow sits where it sits, she said. It shields consent from cash flow. We'll pair you with a financial counselor to run scenarios with your insurance. And a NICU social worker can walk you through what preterm looks like in lived life, not just in bills. But none of that? She tapped the escrow clause from our addendum. None of that can be used as a lever on a medical choice. He nodded, and for the first time since the twins flashed into our lives, I watched his shoulders drop a fraction, like a bridge lowering after a ship passes safely underneath. Question for you, Mom, Dr. Suri said to me, using the name my daughter has made holy. What would help you feel secure? I thought of all the false security on offer in this world, guarantees printed in tiny fonts, signatures taken as talismans. Schedules, I said. Honesty. No cameras where I'm undressed unless I say yes that day. A nurse who will look me in the eye and tell me when I'm minimizing pain. Leela grinned. Done. She wrote, "Dignity and boundaries, no surprise observers, no recordings without contemporaneous consent. Clinicians address the patient first." We circled back to the midnight email, the one that had asked Paper to carry fear. No one shamed him. We treated it like a smoke alarm, irritating, loud, useful. Fear tries to write policy in the middle of the night, Dr. Coe said. Daylight edits. "And here's today's edit," Dr. Surrey added. She held up a stamped copy of our new addendum, non-coercion and life protective measures, the notary's raised seal catching the light like a small moon. "We've put this on file with your chart. If anyone, I mean anyone, calls the nurses' station fishing for leverage, the staff will route them to legal. The bedside is for medicine." My daughter let out a laugh that sounded like a hinge unsticking. "Thank you," she said, "for turning shouting into sentences." We finished without a crescendo. Plans rarely end with applause. They end with lists and follow-ups and a bowl of hard candies by the door. As we stood, Dr. Surrey paused at the screen and tapped the first word again. Autonomy. "People sometimes hear that word and think it means alone," she said. "It doesn't. It means with help, you decide. Our team's job is to make sure help never feels like pressure." On the way out, we passed the ultrasound room. The lights were low for someone else's miracle. Through the half-closed door, I heard it, that watery percussion, a rhythm practicing to be music. My daughter stopped, hand on the jamb, as if reverence could travel through drywall. In the hallway, my son-in-law fell in step beside me. "I've been thinking," he said, almost shy. "About what, Doctor?" Coe said, "Courage as something you carry." He swallowed. "I kept trying to move mine onto you. I'm sorry." "Apology accepted," I said, and deferred in case either of us needs it again. We reached the elevator. Leela handed my daughter a laminated card. "When family asks for updates, she is stable. The babies are stable. The team is following standard protocols. We appreciate your love. We are not crowdsourcing medical decisions." My daughter slid it into her purse like a passport. The doors opened to a soft reflection, three faces a little less pinched than yesterday's. Somewhere on the labor floor, a baby cried the first cry. Somewhere in admissions, a volunteer wheeled a woman with flowers in her lap. Ordinary hospital music. We stepped into afternoon. The sky held the color it gets when it decides not to argue with anyone. My phone buzzed as if the world had thoughts about us again. It could wait. The twins were quiet, that's what mattered. Quiet and growing. Quiet and claimed by a plan that knew who decided and why. On the drive home, my daughter reached across the console, found my hand, and held it the way she did when she was small and the grocery line took too long. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. We had written what needed to be said in places where hands could find it. Risk, we had learned, is information. Fear is weather. Love is the roof you crawl under together. And the sentence that carried us out of that room was simple enough to remember without paper. Risk is data. The decision belongs to the one doing the carrying. Families don't always need a courtroom to make a covenant. Sometimes a kitchen table will do. We cleared the center like we were setting out a board game we meant to win together. My daughter brought pens and a stack of index cards. He brought his laptop, a spreadsheet open to a tab called Plan B, then quickly renamed Plan Us. I brought a binder, a simple three-ring thing with dividers labeled the way a person labels hope. Medical, legal, money, people, after. "We don't need more paper," he said, half teasing, half pleading. "We need the right paper," I said. "Something we can point to when midnight gets loud." We began with what the hospital had given us. I slid in the values note we'd written with Dr. Coe and Leela. It clicked neatly beneath medical. Behind it went the schedule from Dr. Surrey: blood pressure checks at home, growth scans every few weeks, glucose screening, call if this, come in if that. A plan is not a guarantee, but it is a path you can walk without looking at your feet. Under legal, I placed our agreement and the new addendum, non-coercion and life protective measures, the notary's raised seal catching the kitchen light like a small, faithful moon. It looked less ominous at my table than it had under fluorescent office bulbs. Paper shrinks in the presence of soup and people who love one another. "Now," I said, tapping the next divider, money. "We name the fear so it stops hiding behind the checkbook." He opened the spreadsheet. We had already funded escrow. We had already purchased the insurance riders, term life and short-term disability for me, supplemental coverage we hoped never to need, but fear does not respect already. We cannot use escrow to press on decisions, I said, repeating Ramo's sentence until it lodged like a psalm. But we can take away some of the math that keeps you up. Nodded. Niku scenarios, he said, and the word scenarios made him sound like a man building models that saved towns. He had met with the hospital's financial counselor that morning. He had a range of out-of-pocket numbers, columns with deductibles and maximums that, while not kind, at least sat still. He'd also talked to his HR about leave. I can take 2 weeks at birth, unpaid if I have to, he said. And I can bank sick days for appointments. My daughter traced a circle on an index card with the tip of her pen. I'll talk to my manager about flexing hours, she said. They already know the situation. She wrote work flexible and slid it under people. I added a few quiet things of my own. I've arranged for Mrs. O'Malley from church to help with meals if bed rest comes, I said, and I talked to Claire, she's our neighbor who works nights. She can drive me to morning appointments if you're stuck. I put a card in the binder, meals, rides, Claire and O'Malley. Logistics do not heal, but they keep the floor from dropping out while healing works. We made a line for after and listed the sort of matters that seem ridiculous to name until the day you wish you'd named them. Who stayed at the hospital if the twins came early, my daughter and her husband, first, me if they needed to sleep. Who watered the plants. Who texted updates to extended family using the laminated sentence Leela had given us, word for word like a liturgy. She is stable. The babies are stable. The team is following standard protocols. We appreciate your love. We are not crowdsourcing medical decisions. Which brings us to people, I said, and we all knew this would require a different kind of bravery. We made a contact tree. At the top, my daughter, then him, then me. Under that, a single branch for extended family. His mother became the point person, not because she had earned the right to shepherd our story, but because without a job, stories run wild. We gave her the sentence. We gave her the boundaries. We gave her the dignity of a job done well. Power without a role becomes mischief. Power with a role becomes service. Therapy, I added, writing it bigger than I meant to. I looked at him. Not because something is wrong with you, but because you are trying to hold a boulder by yourself. He nodded. I actually emailed someone, he said, surprising us both. Recommended by HR. She specializes in perinatal anxiety. First session Friday. My daughter perked up like a plant that had just been watered. I'll go too, she said. A different therapist. I don't want to make your hour about me. She scribbled therapy, Fridays, and tucked it into people. Then I suppose, I said, I'll ask the hospital social worker for a group or a counselor for carriers. I have hours of courage most days. I also have some quiet afternoons where I need a light on. Under people. We wrote another line, social media, off, no posts. No vague booking requests for prayers for a delicate situation. If someone else broke that rule, we would not read the comments. You cannot stop weather by yelling at clouds. You can go inside. We set communication rules and read them aloud. Questions about care go to me first, not to a nurse's station. Updates go out in one batch from one person with one sentence. No one speaks about my body in public without my consent. If we disagree, we take it to a table, not a thread. My son-in-law tapped the last point with his finger. A table, not a thread, he said, as if trying on a shirt and finding it fitted across the shoulders. We turned to medical again, not because we loved the word, but because it loves clarity. We taped the home blood pressure log to the inside cover and set a twice-daily timer on my phone, breakfast, evening. We wrote down a number to call at 160/110, another at 150/100, and promised each other we would not argue with the math. Love sometimes wants to negotiate with numbers. Numbers are not moved by romance. Celebrations, my daughter said suddenly, the way people say dessert after a long talk about nutrition. Can we schedule joy? Name them, I said. Viability, she answered, eyes bright. 24 weeks, then 28, then 32. She wrote celebrate 24/28/32 and drew tiny balloons. No parties, just pie. Maybe a picture, maybe a song we play in the living room. We can sing badly, I said. It's cheaper than good singing anyway. He smiled, the first easy smile in days. I make a mean buttermilk pie, he admitted. Put it on the list, I said. We did. At some point, the afternoon leaned its elbow on the windowsill and the light grew kind. We were tired in the wholesome way school children are tired after finishing a group project they're proud of. We were not finished, but we were better. Before we closed the binder, I pulled out a fresh sheet and wrote a title no law office would ever use, the things we will not use against each other. Under it, we listed them: money, silence, the children's faces, the word should, the past month's midnight versions of ourselves. Sign it, I asked, feeling a little foolish and not minding. We did. A family treaty, informal and binding in the way promises made in daylight always are. He stood to leave for work, his hand on the back of his chair as if anchoring himself to the moment. I want to say something, he said, looking at me, then at the binder. I kept trying to find levers to keep you safe: paper levers, money levers, internet levers. I forgot the lever is me. He exhaled. I can show up, I can drive, I can talk to my family. I can sit in waiting rooms without inventing emergencies. I don't have to carry them, he said, his voice steady now, but I have to stand with them. We were quiet for the confirmation, the way a church is quiet after a baptism. Then I reached over and closed the binder with a gentle click. The sound a drawer makes when the thing you needed to find finally has a place to sleep. That evening, I set the binder upright on the counter like a cookbook. I brewed tea and traced the raised notary seal with my thumb. My daughter texted a photo from the couch, her feet up, a blanket, a slice of pie he'd brought home. 24 weeks is a ways away, she wrote, but practice never hurt anyone. I sent back a picture of my blood pressure log with the numbers behaving, for once like polite citizens. Before bed, I stood at the window and watched the neighbor across the street pull into his driveway, lift his toddler from a car seat, and let the child lean his sleep into his shoulder. The porch light made a pool around them. Some loves are loud. Some loves are this: a man carrying a drowsy boy, a house key between his fingers, the practiced turn of a wrist. We had not solved everything. No binder, however carefully tabbed, can outvote biology. But we had done what people do when they decide to be a city for each other. We drew streets. We posted signs. We agreed on which way traffic flows when the sirens come. When I finally turned off the lamp, the sentence that settled with me was not complicated enough to require a lawyer and not simple enough to fit on a magnet. It was a promise with feet on it. You don't have to carry them, but you do have to stand with them. Storms always sound louder when you're waiting on news. The rain began at dinner, polite at first, then insistent, then a hand on the roof saying, "Listen to me." By 9, the gutters were busy and the streetlights wore halos. I took my blood pressure the way we'd promised: left arm, feet flat, no talking. The cuff squeezed, the screen answered, one number fine, the other a headline. "Take it again," my daughter said, though we both knew second tries aren't magic. I took it again. The second number climbed a little as if it wanted to see over the fence. She had the bag ready before I said anything. Socks, charger, binder. He pulled the car to the curb and the storm made the decision easy: ambulance. The paramedics moved like people who practice for bad nights and keep their voices low so you remember you're still human. The neighbor's porch light found us. Someone waved. The rain made it all look like a film we hadn't asked to be in. In triage, the cuffs and screens did their unromantic work. Severe range pressures, a lab we didn't like. The nurse's mouth went into the line people learn in hard jobs so they won't say the wrong thing. "We're going to keep you," she said, and it wasn't a punishment. It was a cradle with fluorescent lights. They strapped on the fetal monitor belts and went hunting for percussion. There, tap tap on the left, patient and plucky, tap tap on the right, quicker, like a nervous drummer. Two rhythms that had been with us so long they felt like cousins. Doctor, Surrey came in damp at the shoulders, coat half-zipped, storm in her hair. "Severe preeclampsia," she said without drama. "You've run a marathon on a mountain and your body is telling us the trail is done." She looked at the strip of paper scrolling out of the machine: peaks, valleys, hieroglyphs. "Baby B's tracing is less happy than I'd like. We had the steroid course at 28 weeks. Tonight they hung magnesium for neuroprotection. It made my head feel heavy and my words slow, like a record half a turn off." The anesthesiologist stopped by and did her temple-touching questions. "Any loose teeth? Any reactions to anesthesia?" She explained spinals and Plan BS and Plan CS. She did not pretend plan always wins. A bolt of lightning introduced itself to the hospital. The lights flickered, and then the generator hummed like a choir clearing its throat. Somewhere a baby cried on cue, just to prove the building was doing its job. The room got busier without getting loud. People wear the same color on nights like this, and you have to learn their names by their eyes. The obstetrics resident, young, composed, checked my reflexes. The nurse marked the time. The phlebotomist found a vein and whispered sorry like he'd just stepped on my garden. The strip from Baby B looked like someone had picked up the paper and shaken it. "Talk to me," I said to Dr. Surrey. "We're not going to bargain with your blood pressure," she answered. "And we're not going to teach Baby B to like a heartbeat it doesn't like. The path is narrowing." She took a breath and spoke with the clean kindness of someone who knows people can carry the truth when it's handed to them, not thrown. "I recommend we deliver, tonight. Not we have to, not we must. I recommend," the word we had made a space for. "C-section?" my daughter asked, voice tiny and iron at once. "Yes," Dr. Surrey said. Now, she turned to me. "If you agree?" "Yes," I said before fear could audition its monologue. "Yes," she nodded to the team, spine straight, orders plain. 2 NICU teams at the warmers, 2 OB teams scrubbed. Let's have a birthday. I signed the consent with a hand that did not shake. Then the magnesium made a second decision for me. My stomach rolled and the ceiling swam. The anesthesiologist's hand found my shoulder. "If the spinal takes a minute, we move to general," she said, low and sure. "Your proxy knows your values. We will hold them like we hold you." For the first time all night, I didn't know if I'd get to speak again before the bright lights. That's when he appeared at my side with the binder already open to values note, the page we'd written in a calmer room with people who like to make lists. He didn't recite it. He stood in it. "If time is short," he said to the anesthesiologist, to Dr. Surrey, to himself, "protect her life and try to protect both babies. Don't trade her consent for my panic." He looked at me then, not to ask permission, but to let me see the man he had decided to be when the weather picked us. "We try for both," he said, voice steady as a level. "And we come home with the woman who carried them." They rolled me. The ore was the same white it always is, bright enough to make honesty easy. 2 warmers, 2 teams, a clock trying not to be interesting. The anesthesiologist spoke in a syllable count cadence that felt like a lullaby for grown-ups. "You'll feel pressure. You'll hear voices. You're safe." When the test pinch did not behave, she met my eyes. "We're going to sleep now," she said, and it felt less like surrender and more like trust. As they wheeled me under, the last thing I saw was him at the edge of the blue drape, hair neck crooked, eyes not leaving my face. The last thing I heard was my daughter's voice. She had changed into scrubs without my noticing, whispering the only word that makes sense when promises are about to be tested. "Mom." In the small waiting space outside, thunder argued with the roof. The hors d'oeuvres whispered their open and close secret language. The scrub nurse brought a clipboard and the fast pen you give to people on nights where time costs a lot. "If there's an emergent decision while she's under," she said gently, "this confirms who we listen to." She tapped the proxy line with her finger. His name was already there, written neat from a week ago. He signed where the hospital asked, not to own the outcome, but to own his part of it. Yes to the spinal if possible, general if not. Yes to attempts for both. Yes to mom's life first if the room forces the choice. He did not ask for addendums. He did not ask for guarantees. He set his fear down like a bag he'd decided not to carry onto the plane. Inside, they worked. Outside, he and my daughter held hands without talking and did the math people do when the clock is suddenly the loudest thing in the room. Rain on the windows, nurses in and out. A NICU fellow paused long enough to say, 2 teams, 2 warmers, we've got them. What they tell you about time in hallways is true. It is a liar and it is a mirror. He saw the night he wrote the email asking paper to rescue him. He saw the morning he put that email in the folder behind the addendum that said love does not use levers. He saw the boy on my porch with the mismatched bouquet and the man under the blue cap now, breathing like breathing was a job he'd trained for. Then the doors opened, not wide, just enough to let a sound through. Not music yet. A wet, indignant saw of air. One voice, then, A heartbeat later, another. 2 protests, 2 arrivals. No poetry, just proof. A nurse with the unlikely name of Joy, her badge really said it, popped out, eyes smiling above her mask. A and B, she said. Both here, both feisty, mom's stable. We'll bring you to NICU after she's in recovery. He cried quietly, like a man who has been practicing softness in a culture that sells him hard. My daughter cried in the hunched, grateful way a person cries when the body finally believes the message. Joy squeezed their forearms because there are no rules against that kind of medicine. Recovery was lit like morning, even though the storm still owned the windows. They counted the gauze, 2 voices cross-checking like a duet. I woke to Dr. Surrey's face the way you wake to a favorite teacher saying your name. All 3 of you did great, she said, and in the fog I made a small joke about taking all the credit. She laughed because we both needed a lighter thing to hold for a second. Both? I asked before her sentence finished. Both, she said, and put 2 fingers on my wrist like punctuation. They wheeled me past the NICU windows on the way to post-op, slow enough that a person who had just met morphine could still understand. 2 warmers, 2 hats, tiny hands like punctuation marks. The teams worked with practiced reverence. A nurse lifted my daughter's phone so we could catch a photo neither of us would remember taking. Later, minutes or an hour, time having gone elastic, they helped me sit, then stand, then shuffle in steps that felt like learning to walk in someone else's story. The NICU smelled like soap and second chances. Machines hummed in polite conversation. A monitor blinked in the tempo of a night we had earned. I put a finger through the porthole of baby A's isolette and we hadn't chosen to know, curled around it with the strength of a promise kept. At baby B's warmer, the respiratory tech murmured good job, kiddo the way you encourage a runner who has found a second wind. He stood between them, one hand at each bedside, and the shape of him looked like something you'd carve onto a doorframe to remember who lived here. A man taking up space in 2 places at once because that's what fatherhood requires on the first long night. He looked over at me then, eyes red, mask damp at the edges. We tried for both, he said softly, not victorious, simply true. And she's here. He meant me, he meant them, he meant us, the triangle with a beating center. My daughter slid an arm around my waist, not the part with the stitches, the part that could take an arm, and leaned her forehead to mine. Today, I told him, voice sore and uncomplicated, you chose to be a father, not just a husband. He started to protest, habit, but let the sentence land. He nodded instead, a small bow to the moment and to the paperwork that had grown a backbone for us when the weather hit. Joy, bless her name, brought 2 tiny knit caps in colors that meant nothing except someone cared enough to make these in advance. She labeled them and B with a Sharpie and a flourish like signing art. We'll work on feeding plans tomorrow, she said. You rest, let the machines do the worrying. We stood there, lining, counting, listening until the kind nurse made us go sit down. The storm had decided to pelt the windows again, indignant that it hadn't been the headline. The city's power hiccuped, the generator kept its promise, the babies didn't care about infrastructure. They slept the sleep of people brand new to gravity. Back in the room, I made a mental list to send to Ramos, tell her the clauses worked the way roofs work, unnoticed until they keep you dry. Tell her the addendum didn't make the decision, it gave it a place to stand. Tell her that in the end, the path narrowed just like Dr. Surrey said, and what carried us through the narrow was not a loophole but a vow. We will protect the one doing the carrying. We will try for both. The night took a breath. Machines beat their gentle time. Down the hall, doors sighed open and closed, like a house learning the names of its new residents. On the tray table, someone had left the binder open to after. Under the joke we'd made about pie, my daughter, in a moment I hadn't seen, had written a new line. Sing badly anyway. We were not yet at 24 or 28 or 32, but we had made it through a storm we hadn't scheduled, and sometimes the song you sing to mark that isn't pretty. It's honest. I closed my eyes, not from exhaustion, though there was that. From relief that felt like a blanket with a little weight to it. Somewhere in the NICU, 2 small people practiced being here. In my chest, gratitude kept time with stitches. Outside, the weather argued with itself and finally moved on. Inside, we didn't. We had chosen together what to hold when the paper ran out and the lights were too bright, not levers, not threads, hands, and the steady, unflashy work of staying. The NICU teaches you to celebrate inches. An ounce gained, a tube removed. The way a tiny hand learns your finger and does not forget overnight. We learned the vocabulary, room air, kangaroo care, car seat test, as if they were the names of saints. A nurse taped a paper sun above each isolette when we crossed 32 weeks adjusted, then stars when bottles replaced gavage feeds, then a little paper house when discharge came into view. The unit had a ritual. On the day a baby went home, someone played a soft chime in the hallway. When ours rang, two small hats and B waited on the counter like punctuation to a sentence we had been writing for months. I healed the ordinary way, slowly then all at once. The incision learned to be a story rather than a wound. Blood pressure learned boredom again. At 6 weeks, my obstetrician pressed two fingers near the scar and nodded at numbers she liked. "You kept your promises," she said, meaning the walking, the resting, the coming in when math told us to. I wanted to tell her the bigger truth, that the promises we'd made to each other kept us. But appointments are short and gratitude can live quietly without neglect. The pre-birth parentage order had come through the week before delivery, the judge's signature more like a blessing than a decree. Birth certificates listed my daughter and her husband as they should. In the hallway outside vital records, we took an awkward selfie. Me, puffy-eyed, them, terrified and radiant, two carriers with car seats just visible in the frame. I wrote the caption only in my head, names where names belong, roles where roles were chosen, love with edges so it won't spill. There was an apology, the kind that arrives not in one grand speech but in installments you can cash. My son-in-law stood up at a small family dinner, paper plates, barbecue, the babies sleeping through the noise, and said, "I tried to make paper carry my fear, I'm sorry." He did not dramatize or justify. He named it and then took up different work. 3 a.m., burp cloths, pharmacy runs, a spreadsheet for feeding times that made the nurses laugh when they saw how seriously he took the columns. He did what men do when they have decided to be fathers on purpose. He stood where standing was needed. Boundaries held, not like fences around a crime scene, more like the painted lines on a playground that keep games from collapsing into each other. Updates to extended family went out as a paragraph, not a thread. No one posted about my body. When a cousin forgot and tried, my daughter removed the tag and sent the laminated sentence Leela had given her, gentle as a hand on a shoulder. "We appreciate your love. We are not crowdsourcing medical decisions." The internet finds other cliff edges when you refuse to build it one. At home, the binder lived on a shelf near the cookbooks, a little misshapen from hospital stickers and the weight of its own usefulness. We didn't open it much anymore. Its job had been to give us language when language got scared. Now the house had new languages: the dishwasher's lullaby at midnight, the squeak of the stroller's front wheel that he swore he'd fix tomorrow, the exhausted laugh my daughter makes when both babies pick the same second to discover air. We kept our small treaty. Two, the one written on plain paper in my kitchen, with the title no courtroom would recognize, "The things we will not use against each other." Money did not become a weapon. Silence did not become punishment. We did not invoke the children's faces to win arguments. The word should went mostly unused, replaced with can you and I need. On hard days, the midnight versions of ourselves showed up, and on those days we pointed to the line where we had promised to forgive the midnight versions. Then morning did what it always does when you give it a chance. 6 months passed the way months pass when a house is learning new names. The babies, now decidedly he and she, grew cheeks and opinions. They began to fit the hats Joy had labeled as if the hats had been waiting for them, which of course they had. My daughter's phone filled with the ordinary miracles. A grin that seemed accidental but probably wasn't. Two hands tangled like a team meeting. The first bath that left the bathroom wetter than any bath should. She sent me too many pictures, and I kept too many of them, and neither of us apologized. We started a small thing in their names, not a foundation with capital letters, just a fund at the hospital that stocks the NICU family pantry with coffee, granola bars, and those tiny bottles of lotion that make a long night more bearable. We called it the Sing Badly Anyway shelf because that's what we had written in the binder under after. There are families who will need opera. We supplied plain songs. The nurses sent a note with a photo of the shelf refilled after a hard week. Your babies are feeding other babies' parents. There are currencies besides money. We had been paid in 2 heartbeats and were happy to make change. On a Tuesday, around the time the trees remembered how to be green, we took a walk in the park. He pushed the double stroller with both hands like a captain steering. My daughter carried a diaper bag that could have supported a small expedition. I carried nothing. I had trained my arms to be available without always being full. On a bench by the duck pond, we divided a sandwich 3 ways and sang a mangled version of a lullaby we all knew differently. A woman walking her dog stopped and said, "Twins?" And we said, "Twins," and she said the thing people say, "double trouble," and I thought, double joy, and smiled the soft smile you smile when strangers mean well. My daughter handed me baby B, tiny, warm, amused by light, and for a moment the world got quiet enough to hear the private part of love, the part that understands the difference between claiming and tending. You don't have to stay, she said once, weeks earlier, at the end of one of those days where everything that could spill did. You can go home and sleep. I had kissed her forehead and answered the truest version of yes, I know. I will go and I am staying. Both were true. Both had to be for all of us to be well. That night, after baths and bottles and the peculiar triumph of getting 2 infants to yawn in sequence, my daughter pressed a folded paper into my hand. We wrote this at the pediatrician's office while waiting room chairs did their creak, she said, bashful and proud. It was a list titled Family Rules We Can Live With in a handwriting that looked like both of theirs at once. Sleep when you can. Ask for help before you resent not getting it. Take pictures of ordinary days. No decisions about bodies without the owner's voice. Sing badly anyway. I slid it into the binder behind after and felt the whole book tilt a little toward completeness. Not finished. Stories don't finish, they continue, but sufficient. Safe for the night. Before I left, I stood by the crib and watched 2 small chests conduct air as if they'd invented the trick. There is a prayer people say at bedsides. I have said it in churches and hospital rooms and once in the front seat of a car in a pharmacy parking lot. I said it now without words. Let them be well. Let us be wise. Let love have edges, and let those edges be kind. On my porch at home, the night was busy with summer. The neighbor across the street wrestled a trash can to the curb and waved. Inside, the wooden box in the kitchen drawer held the evidence it has always held, that carrying is a thing a body does and a family learns, and both are holy in their small, practical ways. I pressed a palm to the place where stitches had dissolved, where a line now says, "Something happened here and everyone lived." People ask, in whispers usually, if I would do it again. They mean the pregnancy, the surgery, the storm. I think about the question they didn't ask. Would I sign the papers again that said autonomy is the clause we cannot erase? Would I write the addendum again that turned fear into daylight? Would I sit at the table again and choose a roof over a leash? Yes, to all of it, not because I am fearless, because I am loved by people willing to let love be shaped, by law, by boundaries, by a sentence whispered to an anesthesiologist on a night when lightning chose the hospital, because my daughter's hand still finds the groove between my thumb and forefinger when she is tired, because my son-in-law learned to carry courage without asking me to sign for it, because 2 small hats fit 2 small heads. We end not with trumpets but with habits that hold, checking the binder less often and the babies more. Pie at 24, 28, and 32 weeks turned into lullabies at midnight. The laminated sentence in a drawer under the phone, yellowed at the edges but ready. Love did not demand I give up my say, it asked me to use it. Love did not require surrender. It required growth, theirs, mine, ours, and when the next hard day comes, and it will find us under the same roof we chose on paper and in practice. A contract to protect, not to command. A family that stands, not pulls. A promise that sounds, even now, like a steady, ordinary song. If my heart is still strong, this body will be a home. And when the carrying is done, the love remains, bounded, brave, and enough.